A demotion humiliating to Colonel George Washington. British officials bemoaned the reluctance of the colonists more broadly to rally to the common cause. American shippers, using fraudulent papers, developed a golden traffic with the enemy ports of the Spanish and French West Indies. This treasonable trade in foodstuffs actually kept some of the hostile islands from starving at the very time when the British Navy was trying to subdue them. In the final year of the war, the British authorities, forced to resort to drastic measures, forbade the export of all supplies from New England and the Middle Colonies. Other colonists, self-centered and alienated by distance from the war, refused to provide troops and money for the conflict. They demanded the rights and privileges of Englishmen, without the duties and responsibilities of Englishmen. Not until Pitt had offered to reimburse the colonies for a substantial part of their expenditures. Some 900,000 pounds did they move with some enthusiasm. If the Americans had to be bribed to defend themselves against a relentless and ruthless foe, one hardly needed to worry that they would unite to strike the mother country. The curse of intercolonial disunity, present from early days, had continued throughout the recent hostilities. It had been caused mainly by enormous distances. By geographical barriers like rivers. By conflicting religions, from Catholic to Quaker. By varied nationalities, from German to Irish. By different types of colonial governments. By many boundary disputes. And by the resentment of crude backcountry settlers against coastal elites. Yet unity received some encouragement during the French and Indian War. When soldiers and statesmen from widely separated colonies met around common campfires and council tables, they were often agreeably surprised by what they found. Despite deep-seated jealousy and suspicion, they discovered that they were all fellow Americans who generally spoke the same language and shared common ideals. Barriers of disunity slowly began to crumble.
Control. No zones means no victory. Take them and crush your enemies.
War's fateful aftermath. The conquest of French Canada profoundly affected American attitudes. Without the threat of French intervention, the interior of the continent suddenly seemed open to British settlers. Furthermore, Spain was, temporarily, eliminated from Florida, putting the center of Spanish power far to the west, beyond the Mississippi. As for the Indians, the Treaty of Paris that ended the 7 Years' War dealt a harsh blow to the Iroquois, Creeks, and other interior native nations. The Spanish removal from Florida and the French removal from Canada deprived the Indians of their most powerful diplomatic weapon, the ability to play off the rival European powers against one another. In the future, Indian peoples would have to negotiate exclusively with the British. Right from the start, the British showed themselves to be less adept at Indian diplomacy than their French predecessors. Confident in their ascendancy on the continent, the British aggravated the Delaware, Ojibwe, Miami, and other Native Americans of the Great Lakes region by stationing soldiers in nearby forts, canceling the French practice of gift-giving, and withholding trade for urgently needed goods like gunpowder. In repayment, members of more than a dozen Indian nations attacked British strongholds throughout the Great Lakes. Pontiac's War, named for an ambitious Ottawa leader, laid siege to Detroit in the spring of 1763 and eventually overran all but 3 British posts west of the Appalachians, killing some 2,000 soldiers and settlers. The British retaliated swiftly and cruelly. Waging a primitive version of biological warfare, one British commander ordered blankets infected with smallpox to be distributed among the Indians. Such tactics halted the uprising and brought in uneasy truce to the frontier. His bold plan frustrated, Pontiac himself perished in 1769 at the hands of a rival chieftain. As for the British, the bloody episode convinced them of the need to stabilize relations with the Western Indians and to keep regular troops stationed along the restless frontier. An expensive measure. Seeking to forestall the cost and bloodshed of further Indian wars, the London government issued its proclamation of 1763. It flatly prohibited settlement in the area beyond the Appalachians, pending further adjustments. See Map 6.6, and parenthesis, a tiny rivulet of pioneers had already trickled into Tennessee and Kentucky. British officials hoped by the proclamation to prevent further encroachments. The relentless westward push of colonists would inevitably spark conflict with Native Americans, as it had during the war just ended, when colonial incursions into Cherokee land had turned these British allies into bitter enemies. But countless Americans, especially land speculators, were deeply dismayed and volcanically angered. They viewed the interior of the continent as theirs by right of conquest and even birthright. In complete defiance of the proclamation, they clogged the westward trails. In 1765, an estimated 1,000 wagons rolled through the town of Salisbury, North Carolina, on their way up west. This wholesale flouting of royal authority boded ill for the longevity of British rule in America.
Two for one. A fire team that fights together stays together. Yes! 3 down! the enemy down. 2 for 1. Zone C lost. You captured Zone A. You have zone advantage. Zone B lost. Zone advantage is yours.
This is beautiful. You continue to be my greatest success, Guardian.
5 minutes left. Keep it up. I've seen enough. I'm calling this one. You captured Zone C. That's a power play. You took them, now hold them. You're a wall around those zones. Take that iron will beyond the Crucible.